I've already talked at length about how Astrobot isn't a good game and that people shilling for it are delusional. And this is typical Snoy behavior, right? They are the absolute worst when it comes to overhyping products, right? These are the same people who tried telling us that Knack was better than Super Mario 3D World or that Killzone Shadowfall was a reason to own a PS4, right? They were a joke then and they are a joke now. Okay, like I have emphasized that time and time and time again, and this time it feels like they made a major blunder, a major miscalculation. They really are going to regret this long term. Trying to pretend that Astrobot sold better than Super Mario Bros. Wonder. This isn't like a conspiracy or something. Like there were lots of reputable Twitter accounts that were saying this. Genki GPN is one of the ones I noticed doing this. The claim was that Astrobot outsold Super Mario Bros. Wonder, right? That was the claim. Just like Knack outsold 3D World. Now, this was quickly proven wrong, and like these people had to backtrack, but this kind of showcases, well, first of all, it proves what I've been saying about like Twitter sales people for the longest time, is that all of them are snoys, all of them do everything they can to like downplay every Nintendo product that comes out while hyping up Sony products, right? This isn't unusual behavior for them. The issue is that they vastly underestimated the popularity and the success of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. There is no denying that Mario Wonder was a phenomenon, right? That it sold like gangbusters, that it's hugely popular, that it was really well received, right? There just is no downplaying that game, okay? And so, like, in trying to do this thing where they tried saying that, like, Astrobot was just as good, if not better, than any Mario game, they drew the attention of the actual Mario fan base. People who actually play platformers a lot and actually know their stuff about this. And they were just like, myself included, we were just like, wait a minute, you guys were not around when Super Mario Bros. Wonder came out, right? You were not advocating for it to be considered one of the best games of the year. Like, you did not acknowledge this game as a legit masterpiece, right? We were there. I made content about this, about how every major YouTuber was coming out saying like, "Oh, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, it's just a minor release before the launch of Switch 2 by the end of 2023," right? Remember those days, right? Remember how people were, it was it's like how right now people are still delusionally trying to convince themselves that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be on the Switch too, right? Like it's not going to happen. You're coping. But like uh these guys last year were doing everything in their power to downplay Super Mario Bros. Wonder, to not talk about it, to not give it any credit, to not acknowledge it as a masterpiece in the genre, and like a huge milestone for the brand in general, right? Proving that 2D platformers are still very much viable in this day and age, right? Super Mario Bros. Wonder was an absolute delight to play through, and none of these people shilling for Astrobot really talked about it much at all, exposing them as complete frauds, right? And this is really interesting because this is a well documented thing. I've talked about this. Lots of other YouTubers have acknowledged this. Like the the shilling for Astrobot is just ridiculous. Okay, it's a bunch of plebs getting excited over a PlayStation game that's just a worse version of Nintendo games that already exist, right? Like again, these are the same people who try to laugh at us and call our games kitty and then just go full soy boy beta male cuck like every time that like Sony like rips off Nintendo, right? Just look at Horizon Zero Dawn. Just look at how much like they shilled for that. Just look at like Uncharted or The Last of Us. Like they were worshiping those brands and still do in certain circles, right? Like again, Concord just came out, right? The biggest flop in history. and you guys are going to let yourself be distracted by the robot doing the stupid dance. Like, come on. Like, you need to understand the bigger picture is that this game is not indicative of like a change in culture at Sony, right? This was a publicity stunt to get people believing that like Sony makes good IPs. They make good platformers. Like they're competing with Nintendo when they do not and never have. You know, I remember playing that Daxter game on PSP like when I was a kid, and I was just like, that was like the moment, man. Like that was the moment where you're like going around killing bugs. I'm just like, this is what PlayStation owners think can compete with Nintendo properties. You know, like I was just my mind was just blown at just how like underwhelming it all was. And that like this was the game that people were seriously putting up against like iconic Nintendo brands, right? And like today I don't know anybody who remembers that game. Okay? like like again, who remembers the Jack and Daxter IP at all? Let alone like the spin-off PSP title where Daxter like is in his own game, right? Like nobody cares. The mascot just never became relevant. Like it was a complete and total bomb right from the get-go. And yet, you know, at the time, Jack and Daxter was shilled as a better version of Super Mario Sunshine, right? Like PlayStation supposedly had better platformers than what Nintendo was doing because, like, oh, it has a more elaborate story, but it's not true, never was true, never will be true. And it's not true for Astrobot, right? I don't think PlayStation owners really understand that like Nintendo fans aren't going to accept being antagonized in 2024, right? That's over. Okay. Like it's not going to happen again. I am not going to let it happen again. So, like, these guys are just running scared, right? You know, the game isn't even a week old yet, and like already, like the narrative that like Astrobot is Game of the Year is crumbling. You know, I saw this really good thread on Twitter about the guy. The guy broke down the review scores and like showcased how like the scores it got were like unnaturally high. You know, compared to like the scores that like the outlets typically give out, almost like the journos were paid. But like Astrobot just it's an example of how we cannot allow ourselves to be taken in by hype, right? We can't allow ourselves to be manipulated by YouTubers or e-celebs or Twitter users because they're not they don't represent the actual audience at all. Like, and this is something I've been saying for a long time. It isn't a woke thing, right? This isn't just a culture war thing. It is people shilling for bad products because they know they'll get a paycheck out of it, right? You know, people like making all these clickbait videos like, is Nintendo doomed? Like, yeah, they make money off of that. Like they want Nintendo to do poorly so they can like keep capitalizing on complaining about it, right? Because there's an audience for that on YouTube. Like it is a disaster seeing Astrobot fall to pieces this way. Like all year long, we've been getting releases like this from PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. You know, Space Marine 2 didn't last that long. You know, Tekken 8 fell off. Pow World. Like the list goes on and on. Like we're gonna have a doozy of the worst games of 2024 list, believe me. But until that day comes, let it be known that Astrobot is not a good video game.